Dear learners, today let us discuss the work of George Eliot, Felix Holt, the Radical. The novel is one of the more important works of George Eliot. It is set amidst the socio-political changes that the Reform Act in 1832 was ushering in Trevi Magna, a fictitious English village. The novel depicts the events in the lives of two radicals, Harold Transom, the wealthy heir of the Transom court, and Felix Holt, an artisan. The novel is a political novel as it closely describes the process of election in the rogue boroughs of rural England. Before we discuss the novel in detail, let us look at the life and works of George Eliot. George Eliot is actually the pen name of Mary Ann Marian Evans. She was an English writer and was one of the most versatile of Victorian authors. She was a novelist, a journalist, and a translator. She wrote Adam Bede, The Mill on the Floss, Silas Mariner, Middlemarch, Romola, and Daniel Deronda. Most of these works are set in provincial England. Her novels are realistic and she provides insights into the psychology of her characters. Evans grew up in Warwickshire. It is often said that since Evans was deemed to be an ugly child, her father decided to train her for a career rather than for a marriage. Evans was formally educated for over 15 years and the schooling prepared her for a literary career. On the completion of her education, Evans acted as her father's housekeeper for many years. Post her father's death in 1850, Evans moved to London to pursue a literary career at the age of 30. In 1850, she began to assist John Chapman and worked for the Westminster Review. In 1851, she met and fell in love with the philosopher George Henry Lewis, who was already married and was older to Evans by many years. Yet, they decided to stay together. Despite the social scandal, they were together till the death of Lewis in 1878. In 1880, for the first time in her life, Evans married John Cross, who was 20 years her junior. Evans wrote and published the novels within a span of 20 years. She adopted the pen name George Eliot. In 1859, she published her first novel, Adam Bede. The novel was successful. When Marian Evan Lewis admitted that she was the author, the revelations about her private life surprised and shocked many of her admirers. In 1860, she completed The Mill on the Floss, which she dedicated to her husband. She published Daniel Deronda in 1876. Most of Evans' writings were inspired by the ordinariness of rural English society. Most of her work is explicitly political and she addressed issues such as the Reform Bill, marriage, and historical romance. By the middle of the 19th century, there were many women authors writing in English. Yet, most of the writing produced by women, including that of Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, was set in domestic environment. Evans was one of the first women to have written about the issues which were outside the domestic realm. Her writings, particularly Felix Holt the Radical, besides documenting public processes, also evaluated public policies which were being adopted by England. Her writing thus was also an explicit critique of contemporary political discourse. Evans thought that readers and critics would not accept such writing from women. Hence, she adopted the pen name George Eliot. Evans lived her life on her own terms. Very early in her life, she was drawn to a circle of liberal philosophers which included Charles Bray, Herbert Spencer, and Ralph Emerson. She moved to another group of radical liberals, which included Chapman and Lewis. She was agnostic in her Christian faith and never attended a church service post the death of her father. Evans was a supporter of liberalism and sympathized with radical policies. She was supportive of the Second Reform Act. She thought that individual choices and happiness must be valued over social norms. Her living relationships with Lewis, her marriage with John Cross made her unpopular amongst the Victorian society. Most of the protagonists in her novels share a few of Eliot's characters. Some of the protagonists seem to be autobiographical. Maggie Tulliver in The Mill on the Floss spurned a comfortable and unprincipled marriage. Felix Holt shared a deep sympathy for lower classes, was agnostic in his Christian faith, and was skeptical of marriage as an institution. The character of Tom Tulliver, the brother of Maggie Tulliver in The Mill on the Floss, seems to have been inspired by her brother Isaac. The works of George Eliot have been a part of English literary canon for over a century. Her works are indicative of the realpolitik of 19th century England. Dear learners, let us now discuss the plot of the novel Felix Holt the Radical. George Eliot wrote the novel in 1866. The novel was being written as the Parliament was debating the Second Reform Act, which was eventually passed in 1867. The novel describes the events that happened in Treby Magna, a fictitious village in Midland, England, in 1832 after the First Reform Act was passed. The novel depicts the modes that candidates adopted to ensure that they got elected during the elections. The novel opens with Mrs. Transom eagerly anticipating the return of her favorite son, Harold Transom. Harold, the scion of the Transom family, had left England 15 years ago and had made a career in the East. Harold established a successful business and became wealthy. Mrs. Transom assumes that Harold will save the estate, join the Tory party, and get elected to the Parliament. Mrs. Transom, however, is disappointed. Unknown to the family, Harold has changed. He has married, he's fathered a child, and is widowed. He dreams of a political career. He wants to represent North Loamshire, the family borough. However, Harold is pragmatic and realizes that despite the affinity of his family towards the Tories, it would be better for him if he were to contest as a candidate of the Radical Party. Hence, Harold switches his political allegiance. He also enlists the support of his paternal uncle, the rector of Treby. He hires Matthew Jermyn, the family solicitor, as his chief electioneering agent. Felix Holt also returns to Treby Magna after completing a medical apprenticeship in Glasgow. He has powerful oratorial skills and he desires to emerge as a powerful opinion maker. He is a radical and is agnostic towards religion. He returns to Treby to stay with his widowed mother. He makes friends with Rufus Lyon, a dissenting minister. He meets Esther Lyon, the daughter of Rufus Lyon, and acts in a condescending manner towards her. Felix Holt is disappointed with the electioneering modes that are used by Harold's agents. In a pub, he notices that John Johnson is bribing workers with liquor in lieu of their support to Harold. Felix reports the affairs to Harold. Unlike Harold, who seeks political power for himself, it is clear that Felix wants to empower the working classes. Felix considers Esther as a vain, self-conceited woman. Esther likes Felix but is scared of him. The fact that Esther is indifferent towards her father irks Felix. By the middle of the novel, it is revealed that Esther is not the biological child of Rufus. For long, thinking that her biological father is dead, Rufus hid the truth from his stepdaughter. However, towards the middle of the novel, Rufus confesses to his daughter the truth. Post Rufus's confession, Esther becomes compassionate towards him. She also begins to share Felix's political aspirations. With a change in her attitude, she wins the affection of Felix Holt. However, Felix and Esther together believe that they are not destined to marry each other. On the day of the elections, John Johnson's tactics backfire. The workers who were drunk attack the town. Felix Holt tries to divert the mob but is caught in the crowd. He accidentally knocks down a constable who dies due to the fall. Felix is charged with the murder and is imprisoned. Harold loses the election to Debarry. Meanwhile, Harold has already realized that Jeremy has been embezzling funds from the Transom court. He plans to confront Jeremy and punish him. Jeremy, aware of Harold's intentions, devises schemes to save himself. He is aware that Harold's ownership of Transom court is not legally sound. He discovers that Esther is the real claimant to the estate. Meanwhile, Maurice Christian, the servant of Debarry, informs Harold about the existence of Esther. Felix is in prison, while Harold decides to marry Esther and save the estate. Mrs. Transom and her son visit Esther. Harold proposes to Esther. Esther begins to like Harold and Mrs. Transom. However, she is undecided between her love for Felix and Harold's love for her. She is aware that life with Felix is fraught with poverty and hardships, while marriage to Harold is going to create opportunities for her. Yet, she decides to stay with Felix. During the trial of Felix, Debarry, Harold and Rufus support Felix in the court. Esther makes a passionate plea for releasing Felix. At the Transom court, Jeremy tries to blackmail Harold. When Harold states that he knows of the existence of Esther, Jeremy is forced to publicly inform Harold that he has indeed fathered him. Harold is stunned, and post the revelation, he leaves the estate. Towards the end of the novel, Esther and Felix Holt are married. Now, let us analyze the character of Felix Holt. Felix Holt is one of the most interesting protagonists of the 19th century. He returns to Trevi Magna after spending many years in Glasgow, where he has completed a medical apprenticeship. He comes across as an opinionated, passionate and a well-read young man who is not a churchgoer. Yet, he is sympathetic to the cause of dissenters. He prefers a life of poverty over comfort and wealth. Instead of practicing medicine, he works as a watchmaker. He returns to the village to take care of his mother. And Felix has also adopted Job, a young orphan boy, and takes good care of him. Felix intends to work for the betterment of the poor working classes and spends his time studying, educating and organizing the social classes. He does not care for the social norms and is a true radical. Felix is introduced to the readers through his mother, Mary Holt. Mary Holt approaches Rufus and urges him to talk to her son. Felix has disapproved her selling medical pills, stating that the pills are useless. He has refused to make a living by selling pills. Hence, Mary seeks Rufus's help to convince her son. As Rufus and Felix meet, both of them find the other to be strange. In the initial conversations, Rufus and Felix disagree on most issues. However, their friendship is strengthened as Felix discovers that the dissenting minister is a supporter of radicalism. Felix helps the minister and supports him whenever he can. During the initial meetings, Felix is unable to stand Rufus' daughter, Esther. He disapproves of her sartorial sense, reading taste and attitude. He is explicit in his disapproval and often hurts her. But as Esther's attitude towards her father changes, Felix begins to reciprocate her feelings. However, he tells her that he feels that they are not destined to marry. Felix's conversations with Rufus and Esther are lively. We come across Felix as somebody who seeks the companionship of principled people and is capable of loving people, is sensitive to the faults of the others and is quick to forgive the faults of others. When Felix realizes that Harold's agents are bribing the workers, he confronts Harold on the unethical electioneering practices. His interactions with Harold vindicate the point that he is a principled man who is not afraid to speak his mind. However, Felix is also intemperate. He is not shrewd. On occasions, he seems to be stoic. On the day of the elections, he walks into a riot and tries to control it. He accidentally knocks down a constable and kills him. During the trial, he pleads guilty to the charge even as he maintains that the killing was accidental. Felix's stoicism is revealed during the closing chapters of the novel. In the epilogue to the novel, Felix complains that the marriage has prevented him from leading a poor life. Thus, we come across Felix as a true radical. Now, let us analyze the character of Harold Transom. Harold Transom is a scion of the Transom family, has left England as a 20-year-old young man, worked for 15 years in the East, where he is amassed a fortune, and has returned to Trevi Magna to try his fortune in politics. Harold is read as the antithesis of Felix, who is portrayed as an honest radical. Unlike Holt, Harold is shrewd and calculative. Even before he sets his feet in England, Harold has decided to join the radical party. He quickly realizes that his solicitor Jeremy has been cheating the family. He tolerates Jeremy and makes him his electioneering agent. His selection of radical party and his tolerance towards the corrupt Jeremy are indicative of his shrewdness. Harold also has the ability to make right alliances. Realizing that the dissenting minister Rufus is influential among the Puritans, Harold shrewdly cultivates intimacy with him. During the elections, when Felix Holt questions him on the campaign strategies, Harold speaks in a very appropriate way. He openly seeks an explanation from Jeremy and placates Felix. Towards the end of the novel, when he knows that Esther is the real heir of Transom court, he attempts to woo her and marry her. These incidents portray Harold as an opportunistic, shrewd, calculative man who is successful in deceiving the world. However, there is a positive side to Harold. He accepts his defeat gracefully. He testifies on behalf of Felix during the trial. He seeks pardon for Felix despite being aware of Esther's love for him. Harold is utilitarian in his outlook. He may have insincere intentions, yet some of his actions have produced positive results. Harold, despite his opportunism, is not as corrupt as Maurice Christian or Matthew Jermyn in the novel. Now, let us analyze the characters of Reverend Rufus Lyon and Esther Lyon. Both Rufus and Esther Lyon are important characters in the novel. The revelation of their actual relationship is the interesting subplot of the novel. The revelation shapes the ending of the novel. Rufus and Esther stay in the village and are known to the villagers. While Rufus' character stays the same throughout the novel, Esther, by the end of the novel, is a transformed person. Let us examine Esther first. Esther works as a French teacher, is beautiful, loves fashion and literature. Her lifestyle is disapproved of by many people in the village. Initially, she is indifferent to the efforts of her father. Felix reprimands her on several occasions. However, towards the middle of the novel, when it is revealed that she is actually the stepdaughter of Rufus, she is reformed. She becomes a caring daughter. Her transformation wins her the affection of Felix. Towards the end of the novel, she becomes aware of the fact that she is the actual heir of Transom court. Though she is swayed by the motherly love of Mrs. Transom and is sympathetic towards Harold, she chooses to stay loyal to Felix. She rejects the Transom court and lives with Felix. Thus, by the end of the novel, we can assume that Felix's influence over her is complete. Reverend Rufus Lyon is the minister of the Dissent Church in Trebi Magna. He is popular among the common folk. He supports radicalism and is regarded as a kind, sincere and a passionate being. Despite the difference in age and outlook, Rufus is befriended by both Felix and Harold. He works together with them for his love for radical ideas. It is revealed that Rufus was once a very popular preacher who pledged his life to the service of the Lord. However, towards the middle of the novel, it is revealed that he married a French woman who was destitute and provided for her and her daughter. After the marriage, he decides to forsake a career in the town and becomes a village priest. The story reveals his humane side. When he learns from Maurice Christian about Esther's biological father, he honestly confesses to Esther about her past. His honesty wins him Esther's love. He sincerely tries to find the owners of the belongings that were lost and found in the park. Despite knowing that Harold is trying to marry Esther, he doesn't try and influence Esther. Towards the end, he tries to get Felix released. These incidents are testimony to Rufus's honesty and sincerity. Now, let us examine the characters of Maurice Christian and Matthew Jermyn. Both Maurice Christian and Matthew Jermyn play very important role in the shaping of the plot of Felix Holt. Despite being minor characters, they hold and reveal critical information to the readers. Both of them are negative characters and seek to manipulate situations to advance their personal causes. They indulge in pelf, blackmail and information trade. Maurice Christian is a servant of Philip de Barry. His real name is Henry Scadden. In his youth, due to his reckless lifestyle, he was abandoned by his foster family. He lives in Trebi Magna under an assumed identity. He hates working as a servant and aspires to lead the life of a gentleman. When Reverend Rufus confronts him about his identity, Maurice refuses to speak the truth. Instead, Maurice evaluates Rufus's character. Realizing that Rufus is emotionally weak, Maurice tries to blackmail Rufus. Maurice researches and comprehends that Esther is not the biological child of Rufus. However, Maurice meets his match in Jermyn. Maurice exchanges sensitive information for his own good. He informs de Barry that Harold is a radical. Seeking personal gain, he reveals to Harold the existence of Esther. Throughout the novel, he does not reveal his humane side. Matthew Jermyn, meanwhile, is a bigger crook than Maurice. He is vile and bullies people who are weaker than him. He ill-treats his associate John Johnson. He even blackmails Maurice Christian. Jermyn is the lawyer of the Transom family who also acts as the election agent. He steals money from the Transom estate, indulges in unethical practices during the elections. Due to Jermyn's shoddy work, Harold loses the election. In order to protect himself, he attempts to blackmail Harold. He tries to bring back the legal battle between the Bycliffe and the Transom families. However, towards the end of the novel, his efforts fail. Jermyn is flagged by Harold and he involuntarily and publicly reveals that he has fathered Harold. He is humiliated and leaves England. By the end of the novel, he loses his face, his position and his son. Dear learners, you have been introduced to the novel Felix Holt the Radical in this class. I hope you enjoyed this class. In the next class, we will discuss the political aspects of the novel in detail. Thank you.